So we do welcome a minister of the Unity Church in Muskegon and a dear friend of the Coptic Fellowship, very much involved, is Diane Stark. Diane was born and raised in Washington, D.C. area, where she grew up in her own mother's Unity Church, and she graduated from the University of Maryland with a degree in education, and she's been actively involved in Unity churches wherever she's lived, which is pretty much spanning the country from Los Angeles, New Jersey, Silver Springs, Maryland, and the Kansas City area, and also now in Muskegon here in Michigan. In 2003, she was overwhelmed with a desire to apply for the ministerial program within Unity, and was ordained in 2006. She came to Michigan in 2007 and is involved with the Unity of Muskegon since 2008, teaching the children and I guess speaking as well. She became a spiritual leader in 2013 when the minister resigned, and since then she has developed the conversation of this ministry to address the issues of daily living, conscious of divine awareness. And that was this previous year's theme, and I think is an ongoing theme of discovering your spiritual power. She touches on that is. She has a couple of grown daughters, and they live in Los Angeles and Berlin, respectively. And again, she was born into the Unity Church. Big influence on her life, and the Coptic is also a wonderful influence. She's doing wonderful things in Muskegon and also for the Coptic family as well. And the Quest for Christ Consciousness Revisited is Diane's presentation tonight.
Thank you so much for inviting me, John inviting me to speak, and I'm just happy to see everyone, and I'm just so glad to do this. This is such a delight for me. And I hope you recall that, John spoke on this very subject on Easter Sunday, the quest for Christ consciousness. You remember that? Yeah. And so I just love that topic so much, that title. It's a great phrase, the quest for Christ consciousness. I never heard it anywhere before, did you? I mean, he came up with that. It's original, is it not? So I asked John, could I use it for things that I might want to do? And he said, sure, go ahead and use it. And the first thing I wanted to use it was another presentation here, Revisited. And listening to John's presentation closely from Easter Sunday, he did the advanced chakras, beyond the 7 chakras, in his talk. And I'm not going to cover that, but his general, the territory that he covered as the quest for Christ consciousness, I'm saying the same thing. But hey, it doesn't hurt, does it? How many times can we go over this? Infinite number of times. So I'm so happy to be here with you and do this. So then, what is Christ consciousness? First of all, it is not limited to Christianity. Strictly speaking, the word Christ means anointed one. I think more and more people all over the world are becoming familiar with the idea of Christ consciousness as another word for the state of being illumined, or the state of being enlightened. And the state of being anointed with spiritual energy is what we're really talking about. Because Christ means the anointed one. If one were to write a book under that title, The Quest for Christ Consciousness, I dare say it would have universal appeal. Because in these times, the boundaries have become blurred and softened, and people everywhere are hungering for any form of spiritual help, any form of spiritual transformation. But then what is not Christ consciousness? Well, here are consciousness states that are in contradiction or are mutually exclusive to Christ consciousness. One is being afraid of death. Being afraid of death means that we don't realize the immortality of the soul. It means that it's not real to us that we exist in a context that is beyond this parentheses of life on this earth plane. So being afraid of death keeps us from emerging into Christ consciousness. Another one is being in competition with anyone, and that includes jealousy, inferiority, superiority, any kind of measuring one's worth against someone else. Another thing that is not Christ consciousness is being in judgment of anyone, including yourself. This was what Jesus taught so much. Judge not, but judge righteous judgment. Judge not according to appearances. So to withhold our judgment, meaning to project our perception on anything as being evil or less than good or limited or wrong, that keeps us out of the consciousness of anointing. And I love this one. Christ consciousness is not being undisciplined. We're very good about that in Complex, teaching the discipline. John talked about that so beautifully in his presentation, because indulgence creates imbalance. Imbalance creates pathology, and pathology creates collapse. So being undisciplined leads to collapse. William Morris Buck, anybody recognize that name? The author of a book called Cosmic Consciousness? Alan says, yes. Well, William Morris Buck, in his breakthrough study published as Cosmic Consciousness, that was in 1897 it was published, he describes his theory of what a consciousness breakthrough experience is and how it affects people. And he called that cosmic consciousness. One thing is they no longer fear death. Another thing that characterized what he did was he described cases of individuals throughout history that he thought had experienced cosmic consciousness. Buddha was one he described. Jesus was one. Shakespeare was one. And another quality that they had was a shining countenance, an elevated moral character. And their face beams with a new radiance, he said. He theorized that this was the dawn of a new evolutionary state in humanity. That it wasn't just some extraordinary thing that some people had and it made them special, but that it marked a new era, an evolutionary, emergence of what all human beings are destined to become. And that it would ultimately lead to what he called cosmic consciousness being the dwelling place of all humanity. He was a Canadian psychiatrist or psychologist, William Morris Buck. I have a copy of it. Anybody seen a copy of that book? It's really quite a landmark piece. If we were to dedicate ourselves to strictly pursuing the change in consciousness, the awakening of mind and heart, all our other problems would self-correct. No crime, no exploitation of people and nature, no countries dropping bombs. But personally, on our own personal level, cultivating Christ consciousness, or even call it cosmic consciousness, would mean that the energetic quality of your soul, your thoughts and feelings, would become a creative healing force within you, and health and well-being would radiate throughout your entire mind and body. But now I'd like to look at the part of this topic that is implied by the word quest, the quest for Christ consciousness, because I feel the rhythms and pulses of the world of humans is becoming more pressed, more desperate in a way, and rightly so. The ice formations are melting, entire ecosystems are in wholesale collapse. Trash is accumulating and choking out life forms. Okay, I'll stop there. The answer, though, is to be found in being identified as a collective, in that oneness, in that unity, in that fellowship, the Coptic fellowship. As one humanity, not races, not countries, not cultures, but identifying ourselves as one humanity committed to the common good. This is where the answer is to be found. I know that cynicism is very reasonable. I mean, I know that globally, this idea has yet to succeed almost anywhere. We're still holding on to control that is identified as political bodies, historical bodies, tradition, and fear of scarcity. I see the quest for Christ consciousness as a full-on effort to experience and attain that solidarity of humans that is needed to overcome the difficulties that loom before us. So what would it look like if this quest were to really catch on, become a global trend, be a popular idea? Can you imagine companies treating their employees like their own beloved family, countries treating their neighbors like trusted friends, coexisting with all life forms, protecting them from poison and habitat loss? And on a personal level, what is our quest to attain Christ consciousness and why? Why do we consider this spiritual journey? What will it do for you on a personal level? It will save you money and make you better looking. That's a joke. But but seriously, folks, it will save you money and make you look better looking, but you can save money and look good without Christ consciousness. What you cannot do without Christ consciousness on this quest is you don't grow. Growing is what makes life compelling, interesting, worth paying attention to. What you cannot do without taking on this quest is you don't succeed in relationships. You don't succeed in love. The high divorce rate, the failed relationships, because there is no connection with the divine. What you cannot do without taking on this quest is you don't heal. The impact of trauma from the past gets buried deeper and deeper, and its healing is put off. An awakening in consciousness of the innate power of absolute good, perfect life, and divine order empowers us to transcend the past. It empowers us to transcend any limitation. So here's the good news. In our personal, individual, deep within part of us, we become stronger when we take on this quest for greater wholeness, inner peace, and for heartfelt joy. You know, there's not very much in the Gospel of Thomas that really sticks. But if you've ever looked at it, it doesn't have any content about the history of Jesus or where he went or his family or any of the things that we have in the other Gospels. All it has is Jesus said da da da, and Jesus said da da da. Jesus said this, and Jesus said that. So one of the things that, and I'm sorry I don't have the actual text, but this is pretty much word for word what it is. And Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is like a woman carrying a jar of grain. And on the road home, the opening breaks. And by the time she arrives, all the grain has fallen out. Now to us, our acquisitive Western minds, that's not a very nice story. But what it means is that, the road home is our quest for spiritual awakening, our devotion to realizing our true being. And the jar of grain represents our problems. And when we stay true to that journey of unfolding spiritually and expanding spiritually, our problems drain away. And I'm sure you can think of times of experiences in your life where you've committed yourself to overcoming something, and just by sheer dint of your commitment and determination to do it, you achieved it. And I want to share a story about that from my life. You know, my father was in World War II, and I was born in 1945 while he was overseas. I was conceived just before he left. And so when he got home, I was already a year and a half old, and I didn't understand who he was, and I was afraid of him. And I just spurned him as a child, and nobody made an effort to get us past that initial reaction. In fact, maybe the effort that was made did more to make it worse because we were pushed together, we were sort of forced together. So, and these are the effects that war has on our lives. This is one of the circumstances that's unfortunate that war leaves us with. So the whole time I was growing up, my father and I had no attraction. We didn't like each other. We didn't trust each other. My sister came along as a surprise when I was 7 years old. And I was surprised to see how good my father was taking care of her. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe he's not so bad to have around after all. And so she became daddy's girl and I became mama's girl. Okay, fair enough, fine. I'm happy with that. But when I got to be older, I wasn't happy with it. By the time I was old enough to be in college, I started thinking, I really want to have a loving relationship with my father. I I want to see what that feels like. So I started to reach out to him, and he rejected me. He blew it off. He did not believe it. He thought I was faking it. He thought I was just doing it for show. He was so convinced that he had accepted deep in his heart, well, Diane just doesn't like me, that when I tried to reach out to him, he couldn't believe it. So I didn't know I was going to have to confront this much difficulty. I thought, oh, it'll be easy. I'll just tell my dad how much I want to be close to him and appreciate him and it'll be fine. But no, it's like, and when he got older and he would be in a retirement home, I'd call him up about every 5 days or so, and he'd say, "Well, Diane, I'm kind of busy. I got to go right now. Bye bye." And yeah, so what happened was I reached a point where I just said, "Well, I don't care what he does. I am going to get to know my father, and I am going to keep on reaching out to him and taking my stand to have a loving relationship with him, come what may." And in that journey, I came to learn a lot about my father I wouldn't have known. I mean, when I went into, he was a drugstore manager for a group, a chain named People's Drugstores. Have you heard of that chain? Anybody in Washington, D.C.? It was a big chain. So he was like an assistant manager all those years because the way they arranged their administration, managers had to be college graduates, which he was not. And they dealt with the merchandise and the money. Assistant managers did not have to be college graduates, and they dealt with personnel, hiring, firing, payroll. And that's what he did. So I went into his store one day just to say hi to him, and it was a new place. He hadn't been there very long, so they didn't know anything about him. They thought I was some young chick trying to flirt with him. And they knew he was married, so they said, "What do you want to see Mr. Sandifer for? He's busy." And then so, "Well, I'm his daughter." "Oh, you're Sandy's daughter." So this great big African-American man stepped up to me and he says, "Oh, you're Sandy's daughter? I'd step in front of a bullet for that man." So that was the first I started to know of my father's great heart, you know. And one time I said to him, Dad, all these years you've been in retail, did you ever get robbed? And he said, uh, well, one time we were closing the store and it was just me and the pharmacist and the cashier and the customer, and I had locked the door and he was the last customer. And all of a sudden he pulled a ski mask over his head, pulled out a gun and said, everybody stand over there and give me your wallets. So as I gave him my wallet, I said, man, you don't want to do this. This is not the way. And he just said, shut up, give me the money in the cash register. So I got the money in the cash register, I put it in his hand. I said, man, this is my father talking. Man, you don't want to do this. This is not the way. And my father said, and the man hesitated and he gave the money back and he said, you're right. And he walked out. He walked out. And my father didn't realize it, but to me, that was a great heroic deed he did. I mean, he's looking down a barrel of a gun and he's thinking about the shooter and not himself. So I did learn that there were qualities about my father very much to love. And so one day I had made one of those phone calls where he usually says, you know, I'm kind of busy, Diane. I'll talk to you later. Bye. And he's telling me, hey, Diane, I spent the afternoon with your kids and, you know, they're such delightful girls. You know, I think you've done such a good job parenting them. You always tell them the truth and you've done a wonderful job being their mother. And I go, really? And that was it. That was when we had come through. That was the starting point of him opening his heart to me. And so we had about 15 more good years before he passed away. But that was a journey. That was you know, that was a quest for love. That was a commitment. And that's what we all are on, really, is a journey and a quest to arrive at a place of wholeness, to arrive at a healing, to arrive at new power. So in summation, I tell you, the cycles of our lives, the yearnings that move us to expand our understanding of what is real, what is illusion, and what is possible, all become a spiral of unfoldment. The quest is a continuing process of consciousness evolution, attaining and establishing ourselves in the eternal truth of the consciousness we call God. As the droplet in the ocean, we experience what we may call Christ consciousness. It is our destiny. Amen. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a story. And you had 15 wonderful years with your father just by making that breakthrough. Diane, you touched on something that struck a chord with me. Don't be so judgmental on yourself. And
Yeah.
I think of what came to mind when you said that tonight was we're ending a 26,000 year cycle. How does that tie in with judgment, evaluation of yourself? That thought kind of popped in my mind about a week or so ago, and it rang true again tonight. I mean, don't be so judgmental on yourself, but just be in that moment. It's so tough sometimes, but to get there and to be in that moment, that's huge. And honor yourself. So, thank you for sharing that tonight.
You're welcome.
Any comments, questions for Diane tonight? What a wonderful topic, and taking it another step, I would say, from what John spoke up on Easter Sunday.
Yeah, I was thinking when you said that if anyone decided to write a book by that title, it'd be well received. And I'm thinking, okay, I can see a book written where Diane's supplies a portion of it. John supplies a portion of it. I know I could probably contribute a chapter or two for it, and we could probably come up with a collaborative effort and ride under that banner.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
The only other thing that I can think of to comment about, you'd mentioned something about indulgence. I'm not exactly sure how you phrased it, but basically indulgence leads to disorder or something along that line.
Indulgence leads to imbalance.
Imbalance. Okay. Yeah, that's what you said. But I'm also thinking that if you completely deny yourself all forms of indulgence and only focus on responsibility, that could also be unbalanced. And I think we need a little bit of both.
Well, I mean, I'm not talking about sometimes having your, experiencing your appetites gratified, but going way out of balance with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I left out a step there. It was indulgence leads to imbalance. Imbalance leads to pathology. Pathology leads to collapse. Yeah. That I find, I've had really good health so many years because I don't traumatize my body. I don't avoid things that are pleasurable, but to overload, to go way into it and traumatize your body in some way, you pay a heavy price for that.
Yeah, you can overdo pretty much anything.
Diane, you mentioned on the unbalanced comment that Ellen was just bringing up. You mentioned about divinity is the foundation for, and it's easy to say to all of us because we believe in that. But those that are led astray and lost their way in life, what do you tell folks like that are looking for direction?
What a great question. Boy, I mean, that's the opportunity when someone is suffering because they have made choices that what you call lead them astray, or they're paying a price they don't like anymore, is I remind them, so what do you want? And they say, I want to be happy and healthy. And I say, well, you're not going to get it down this road that you're going. That's what I tell them. That's the first step. That's the first step, because they're not, at that point, they're not really ready to hear anything too metaphysical or too spiritual. They won't really understand that, but to understand that you cannot get what you want that way. Pretty nuts and bolts.
Makes good sense.
I was giving my talk this morning at Unity. Was called The Thoughts You Think. And it's a, language pattern that we all know from Smokey the Bear, only you can prevent forest fires. The life you save may be your own. Remember that big drive. Okay. So I was remembering that language pattern, the blank, you blank, and then the result. I saw a psychic one time when I was in my 30s and I was in a lot of, I was, suffering and in a lot of turmoil and over some love affair thing, And the psychic said, well, your grandmother's here. She had passed on. She said, your grandmother's here. And she says, the heart you break may be your own. I carried that with me forever. I just thought that was so precious. And that's what you're talking about. Like when people are going down the wrong road, to see that, main person that's going to be, that's going to be affected by this is you. The life you ruined right now is your own. And my daughter Becky was telling me about a friend in their circle of friends who's really struggling with alcoholism. And he could be a very successful, very wealthy musician, but he chooses to drink practically, and it looks like he's drinking himself to death. And she was saying, Mom, I just can't understand, why is it so hard for him to make a connection with the divine, for him to because that's what's gone, that's what's not there. No connection with anything transcendent, with any possibility, with any sense of more than what we're seeing in the appearances. And that's just it. The irony of that we have this free choice, we have free will, it's all there for us. But I think that humanity is reaching that point where they're ready to step up as one humanity and evolve collectively. I mean, do you feel that? Do you all feel that? That's what's so exciting about being alive now. That's what my talk was about. Okay.
Yeah. I think you really touched on a really important point in there as far as people who overindulge in certain things that are detrimental to them in one way or another. I remember reading somewhere that the reason that most people get into these self-destructive patterns is because they're trying to fill a hole that cannot be filled with anything other than a connection with the divine.
Yeah.
Well, what about the things that we chose before we came in? Karma, whatever. It's like a path of destruction that someone is going down, maybe exactly what they need to get to the point where they're ready to turn it around and do something different. It's like you spoke about the musician who is killing himself with alcohol. If anybody's been in the recovery community at all, it's called hitting bottom. And for everybody, their bottom is different. But until you hit bottom, you're not ready to start climbing back up. And so sometimes the choices that they're making are absolutely, they're harming them, yes, but they're absolutely where they need to go.
Yeah.
Until they're ready to turn around and come back up.
And, because they are an eternal entity, an eternal soul, whatever happens in this life journey is for their progress.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of the, and I've probably said this before, there's a book called The Eye of the Storm, and it's not the eye that we see out of it, it's the I, the letter I. And they opened really early in the book, it's by Gary Simmons, with the with setting like, these are the ground rules. This is the premise of this book. It says nothing and no one is against you. Everything that is in your life is for you. And when you get it that way, then you know when you can accept that, then when things aren't going to according to your liking, if you remember, you would say, well, what this is for me. So what is this for? How am I supposed to learn from this? So sometimes people have to do those destructive behaviors until they realize that it's actually for them to learn something about.
That's a very transformative book. That's a wonderful book. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've got a friend out in California who is kind of a thought leader. And one of the phrases that he has been using for many years is the phrase, "It's all for my best and highest good." And he tries to get people to think that concept that you're talking about, Michael Joy, that everything is here for you and there's a benefit in everything that is in your life. And when you start looking at your life as if everything is a benefit, that thought pattern, that belief tends to shift your reality so that everything that is in your life is more of a benefit than it was before.
Okay.
Although I will also add the thought that the idea that we have to hit bottom before we can turn things around, I can't say anything definite, but I can say that my personal feeling, my personal belief is that's not necessarily true. I think we have the option to turn things around at any point. It's just that most people don't until they hit bottom. I don't think it's an absolute necessity.
Well, there's another thing that seems to be true in my life. It's like you can talk to people all day, but sometimes they will take what you're saying to them as that they're wrong and resist it, or they have to, if it's something they have to do or add or become a discipline in their life, they aren't willing to do it, and they'll reject you right up front. It's like, nope, I'm not going there. I don't even want to hear what you have to say because it means I have to change something, and I'm not going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, everybody wants their life to improve as long as they don't have to change.
Right.
That's why one of the phrases that I've been using in my work for at least the last year or two is that the life you live is a reflection of who you are. If you want your life to change, you have to change who you are, at least on a belief level, if nothing else.